What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's going on with the economic calendar affecting the market for tomorrow and what's happening with some big earnings and what's likely going to pan out looking at the current charts. But before I break anything down, all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. Firstly, I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed up to 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed up to 15 free stocks, and the offer ends very soon. Anyways, now let's break down what's going on with the markets. Looking at SPY, we saw this thing still off just a little bit, especially going on to Friday, and this thing still closed kind of flat, but then during the afterwards, we saw a little bit more selling. So we're going to be watching to see how this ends up panning out. Please know that for Monday, it's going to be January 29th, and we don't really have anything too crazy coming out for data. We have the Dallas Fed Manufacturing Index coming out in the morning, the 3-month and 6-month bill auctions all coming up before the market opens. And then besides that, there's not really anything else, right? The Fed is in a very silent period right now. We're not seeing any crazy pieces of data, so the market's going to have some freedom, at least for a very, very short period of time. And that's because of the fact that when Tuesday comes, with the house price index coming out and the JOLTS job openings, that's going to affect the market to some extent. And it's going to be in preparation for what's about to come on Wednesday. Wednesday is going to be a very important day for the week. Please remember that because it's the last day of the month. And on top of that, later on during the day, we have the FOMC meeting and we have Jerome Powell giving a speech on Wednesday. So that's going to be very, very important. We're getting ready for all of that. The market's going to start off very quiet, and we're going to see a lot of stuff coming out later on. Right now, the market is extremely greedy, so you want to be a little bit careful when you see the market at these extreme levels and at extreme greed in terms of sentiment. This is generally when the market gets ready to start topping. Now, this doesn't mean the market has to crash tomorrow or immediately. It just suggests that considering where the market is right now, this is when you want to just be a little bit careful. Don't forget about the market momentum. This is at extreme greed as well. It's been at extreme greed for quite a while, and other indicators are very greedy. Two last things worth mentioning are the fact that the put and call positioning is now back to extreme greed because we're starting to see a lot of puts being closed, which led to a squeeze. And then we ended up seeing, market makers and institutions hedging when they close puts by buying up shares. That's what they tend to do. And that the share buying is what actually pushed up the markets even higher. But now they're positioning in a way where we're starting to see the puts and call ratios basically dropping, and a lot of call buying has come back in for the overall market as we're hitting extreme greed again. So you want to be very careful in seeing that. Now, for market volatility, this is still kind of flat. The VIX is kind of going back and forth between the 50-day moving average. So not a whole lot's going on yet until we get a breakout in either direction. But generally, when the VIXs are near these levels, we tend to get a breakout later on. Could take a few months, could take a couple of weeks. So just be a little bit careful in looking at this. For earnings for tomorrow, it's going to be very minor. We just have SoFi, a couple of banks out there, very, very minor earnings for the morning. And then after market close, very minor earnings again. You just have like Super Micro and just a few others. So very, very minor stuff. But then from Tuesday through Thursday, things become a lot more serious. On Tuesday, we've got Pfizer, GM, and just a few others. We also have Microsoft, AMD, and Alphabet on Tuesday after market close. Wednesday is going to be a little bit quieter since we have the FOMC meeting. And for Thursday, it's going to be a big day as we have Apple, Amazon, and Meta all announcing earnings near the same period. That's going to be pretty crazy. So get ready for the big earnings coming out. Luckily, the market starts off on a very slow end. We're going to start off very slow on Monday with not too many big earnings, not too much data. We're just going to start off, take a breather, get ready, and then things become very intense starting on Tuesday. That's what I just wanted to warn you about. So what's happening to SPY? SPY is in a very, very interesting state right now. We basically had a failed breakout attempt from this wedge. So we had this wedge that was forming, and we failed to really get a clean breakout. We kind of rejected right here. And then we had this, yellow trend line from the wedge that was acting as our support. We've actually broken below this in the after hours. So I just want to mention that if you want to be bullish on SPY, I have to see this thing try to get back up of 488, try to get back above this yellow trend line, back above 488, and it has potential to push back up to the high from Friday, not to mention 490. If we're bearish, I need to see this thing lose 486. If we lose that, I think we're going to be coming all the way down, not just to 485, but potentially even 484 would be my target, down where this wick is right here. I think we're going to be coming all the way down here if we lose 486. Okay, so what is going on right now? Well, we're going to be watching for a change of market structure, because you can now like kind of draw out a flag like this, say, oh, we're about to maybe downtrend. But just because we're downtrending doesn't mean we're going to crash forever. That's the one thing a lot of investors get wrong, especially when they're new. They think that once we start downtrending, like that's it, we're going to collapse, the market's going to crash. It's not like that. We could downtrend like this for an extended period of time, get to these low levels, and eventually bounce, right? So when I talk about, excuse me, guys, I apologize. When I talk about downside, I'm not always referring to like the downside lasting for another 2 straight weeks. I'm just referring to like a move to the downside, and things could always flip like that. So you want to be very open minded and very adaptive. All right. So I just wanted to clarify that point. But now, what do I see from the charts? Here's my answer. So when we go to SPY, you will notice that the 4 hour is starting to turn. We have this more, a stronger looking bar to the downside. We also have our very important 20 EMA right here. So, if we lose this, I think this is going to reach 486 by tomorrow. If we lose that, a bigger drop is coming. We're looking a little bit weaker in terms of momentum, and volume is not the best. So, what I would say is the most likely possibility is we kind of push back up in the morning, either grab some liquidity, like when we retest this trend line, and then we reject and come back down to 486, possibly even lower levels. So I find that to be the most likely possibility. As we're actually looking a little bit weaker, we might get a temporary cool off right before the big tech earnings. So look for a little pop and drop like move, and I find that to be the most likely possibility. Make sure you watch your levels just to be safe. On top of this, when it comes to the QQQ, if you want to be bullish on the QQQ, right? If you want to see this thing break out, let me just close this because this is a little bit distracting. We don't have to worry about that anymore because since the move already panned out, basically we attempted to bounce here. Now we're kind of establishing a downtrend on the QQQ. Notice how we had a 5 wave count structure to the downside. After we got the 5 wave count, this is looking a little bit weaker. So if you want to turn bullish, you first want to see this thing get back above not just 425, but the highs we made, like around 426 plus from Friday. If we break above that, we could be pushing back up to 427, 429 in this range up here. If we're bearish, you want to see this thing basically lose, in my opinion, 422.5. If we lose that, I think 421 is coming next, followed by 420. The reason I have such tight ranges is because when you look at this, guys, we had very tight ranges right here between 420 and 421. But the most important support of all is going to be 420. If we lose that, a bigger drop is going to be coming down to 418, 416, those lower levels. So, what do I think the triple Q is doing? My answer is I think that it's going to pop when we open, because notice how when we open, we popped and dropped, popped and dropped, popped and dropped 3 days in a row. So, it might pop again. They might grab liquidity up here, 425 or so, and then it might actually sell off a bit more. We could even see it retrace a little bit lower and get closer to 420 than just trade sideways. A little sell off right before the big tech earnings would be the most likely possibility. So watch those levels carefully. I'm going to start off with Tesla and get back to Nvidia a little bit later. Uh, let's just do Tesla first, then Nvidia and Apple. So for Tesla, just want to mention that this thing took a really big hit, and it's not doing a great job at getting a big bounce back up. You guys could see how it's trying to react to these different levels. So this is what it basically did for the last day. Let me just look at some important levels on Tesla one more time. Just to double check this, when you look at the hourly time frame on Tesla, this thing has some resistance at the 20 EMA. So we're actually approaching resistance. We're going to see if Tesla can try to break this. My best uh, assessment would be to watch the levels on Tesla, because if we break above this 184.4 to 185 range, if we break that, our next target is going to be all the way up to 186 to 187.5. If we break above that, 190 is coming next. If we're bearish, you want to see Tesla lose. If it loses 182.5, so like this support right here, a bigger drop is coming to 180, and it has to hold 180. If we lose 180, there's going to be a risk of it coming all the way down to 175. A bigger drop could happen later on. Okay, Just because it loses 180 doesn't mean it's going to fall immediately to 175. That just increases the odds of a drop down there in the future to 175 later on. So you want to be very careful. What do I think Tesla's doing? Tesla could be attempting to uptrend here if we manage to be making higher highs and higher lows. I think Tesla's going to try to pop when we open. It also depends on the news. It's very news dependent. And we're going to likely retest this resistance up here. But I don't know if Tesla's going to be able to break this. We're going to be watching to see if we get another rejection, come back down, or if we fail to do so. My best prediction would be it depends on the news, of course. I can't always predict that. But I think Tesla might pop and then drop back down and might just chop a lot. We might see it just be stuck within this range again. We might see it come back down to the 182s and just trade sideways temporarily. It might be a little bit weak because of the market slowing down. So we might see Tesla pop and then drop and then just trade sideways going into tomorrow. What about for Nvda? Nvda looks a little bit weaker. Uh, this thing had a double top leg formation, came back down. And then on top of that, we're starting to get very tight on Nvidia. I think that 607 is a critical support. If we lose 607, I think it's going to be sinking back down towards 602 to 600. And if we manage to break above 612, we're going to be watching for 616 and then eventually 620. Nvidia is getting very tight. You can see right here, up, down, tight, 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 tight. There's going to be a risk of it coming down to 607, in my opinion. And if we lose that, a bigger drop should be expected. So, in my opinion, I find that to be very probable. I think Nvidia is going to cool off just a little bit temporarily. And I think that it's going to be testing 607 and eventually some lower levels because one could argue that this is starting to resemble like an inverse cup and handle. We have like the cup here and the handle potentially forming, and this could lead to some downside, possibly. So watch it carefully. There's a very good chance Nvidia might retrace. So watch support and see if this change in structure ends up developing. On Apple, Apple is also looking weaker. If you look at Apple, we had a very, very distributive structure, this head and shoulders like structure. And if we keep falling, our next target is going to be this gap down here to 191.25 to 190.5. My prediction is Apple's going to pop in the morning, get back liquidity in the 193s and come back down. I think Apple's going to be heading towards 191 and eventually 190.5. And then we might see some sideways price action after that. We might see a little sell off right before we get to earnings, but then the bigger move is going to be determined once all the earnings come out. But that's basically my view of the market for now, a risk of some downside. And this is just to start the week temporarily. Things could always flip later on, depending on earnings. The Russell 2000 looks a little bit weak. I could see this thing retracing towards 194.77. So look for a little retracement. That looks very probable. I think it's going to test uh, the hourly 200 EMA. So I see a little retracement towards the 194 is coming, and then some sideways price action. For Microsoft, we have earnings approaching very soon. Generally, before earnings, Microsoft runs, but it's looking a little flat right now. It might test 402 and just shop around. That's the most likely possibility looking at this. So it looks like it might, it might hold up a little bit better. For AMD, we have earnings approaching. This thing might test 175 and just trade sideways. I'm not really expecting a whole lot from it. This is still technically bullish on this overall structure. But watch around the 20 EMA. Do we hold this or not? 175 is going to be our key level. If we lose this, we're going to turn bearish. I think it might actually come down a little bit and trade sideways. So watch that very carefully. The VIX is just shuffling around the 50 moving average, going back and forth and back and forth. So we'll have to see if this does anything. So far, it's kind of stuck. It's attempting to try to balance, but we have to wait and see. The dollar index is kind of flat right now, not really doing a whole lot. So once again, the dollar is also very indecisive. So we'll have to see if that bounces. Coinbase is a little flat, attempting to rebound. So you can see it actually based very nicely around this 118 area. And now it has this resistance very close to about 128. So tomorrow, I think it might test 128 to 129, push a little bit higher than just continue to trade sideways. Got a nice triple bottom, but there might be a little pop coming before some sideways price action. For Google, we have a nice uptrend. There's no sign of this breaking down. It might cool off to retest 151 and then bounce after that and push back up higher to 153. So I might see a little retracement and push back up, but it's still bullish overall. Amazon's a little tricky because we hit resistance at around 160, might grab liquidity at 160 and retrace to 157, then balance and trade sideways. I think 157 to 160 is going to be the range, so I don't really see a whole lot with that. And then for Meta, I think we're just under 400 approaching earnings. We might see this thing try to get very close to 400. Watch it retest 390 first and might retest this 20 EMA and might attempt to bounce from there. So watch that very carefully. But other than that, guys, that's pretty much it for the video. Thank you all for listening. Make sure you watch your levels just to be safe and get ready for big tech earnings. Do what you have to do. I'll see you guys very soon on the next one. Thank you and peace out.